Good morning. This is Dylan Giovanni with Behind the Markets. Happy Tuesday. Today is Tuesday, June 23rd. Today, I'd like to talk about a little piece I picked up in the Financial Times. Really, it talks about the private equity firm Bain Capital Management, which is one of the world's leading advisors on deal making, has actually set up a group of programmers to do vibe coding to see if they can recreate the business models of companies whose stocks are out there. They're trying to see how much of a competitive advantage companies that are publicly traded out there really have, how easy it is to replicate their business models using AI. Very, very interesting. They've done hundreds of these prototypes, and what they find is, which is something that we've been finding too here, there are a lot of companies out there that are at risk of AI just completely wiping away their businesses. It's unbelievable. So you have professionals, and what Bain does is Bain helps companies, they're a deal advisor, so they help you analyze acquisition targets, et cetera, et cetera. So they're actually using AI to help them communicate and advise companies on what they should buy or not buy. Hey, this is the company you do not want to buy. Or if one of their clients is at risk, maybe Bain advises them on a company you can buy if you still have a lot of cash, where you can actually reduce your competitive threat. And it really tracks very, very interestingly with this little note, this little article that came out last week, that Google and Microsoft are actually teaming up to really push back on AI. They're basically saying that the CEO of Microsoft, Nadella, came out the other day and said, look, you can't have a situation with AI where 2 or 3 companies take all of the economic value from every other company on earth. You just can't have a situation like that. That is not reasonable. The population won't really support that. So you have Microsoft, and it's interesting. A competition like this makes for strange bedfellows. Time and time again, we see that. So, you're seeing this, and, we put out a report for you. You can get it in Behind the Markets, talking about companies that I personally actually just looked at really hard using AI and said to myself, which companies are most at risk from this? And I came up with a list. It's in the report. Some of them on the list are Accenture, ACN, Adobe, of course, Public Group of Companies, Invesco, Franklin Resources. I came up with a list, and it's on the website in the bonus report section and Behind the Markets. And basically what it shows you is companies that are most at risk for disruption by AI. It also shows you companies that have the strongest, most durable moats. What I tried to do is rank the top moats of the S&P 500, companies that had incredibly durable competitive advantages where AI wasn't much of a threat to them. I ranked it as high, medium, and low. And I urge you to get this report because I think it's important, actually. I think you should have it. The other thing I wanted to talk about, there's a brief video, but before I let you go, Alan Greenspan died yesterday at 100 years old. And I'll tell you something, Alan Greenspan was the first Fed chairman that I really, really understood. And you guys remember him from the 90s, and they called him the maestro, and, he did all these great things. And I remember I heard him at a talk in New York once, and they were talking about the Soviet Union, the real collapse of the Soviet Union. And he just dismissively said, well, they collapsed because of oil prices. It was just like a matter of fact, like everybody knew it. Everybody seemed to know it except me, Oh, yeah, they only collapsed because oil prices collapsed, They just couldn't keep paying for their stuff. It's an oil economy. And I remember thinking, wow, there are people that know how economics, like oil prices collapsing could take down an empire like the Soviet Union. That really opened an entire door to me for a whole different way of looking at the world in terms of, and I was in my 20s at the time, geopolitics, national strength, and the economy and the military, where all of those actually came together. And, that has led me on the journey that very much has created the man you see today, little things like that. So he was a good teacher to me, a great teacher in some ways, because it opened a whole new line of thinking. And I realized that actually, and a lot of people don't know this, Reagan was very deliberate with his policy to kind of flood the market and bankrupt the Soviet Union. It was kind of an energy dominance policy. Very shrewd old man he was, boy. He was a shrewd operator, shrewdy. And Trump actually is pulling out the same playbook right now. They have this little staff at the Eisenhower building that is seeking to establish or sustain or maintain energy dominance. So you could see that stuff with Venezuela and Iran really pushing back on Saudi Arabia, the architecture there to make sure that we're not really converting, that we're keeping the dollar as the hegemon currency, because that's very, very important. Anyway, brief video today. That's all I have for you today. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.